Our 1000th episode is coming out in June, and I know you wanna send me a present. You probably wanna Venmo me some money or do something, but you don't have to do that. The best present you could give me is to go do a review. We are trying to get 1,000 reviews of the podcast by the 1,000th episode. If there's an episode that stands out to you, something that's impacted you, and you've never done a review for Practice of the Practice, head on over to your favorite place that you listen to the podcast and do a review. We are trying to get 1,000 reviews by our 1,000th episode. Would love for you to go leave us a review for the Practice of the Practice podcast. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 998. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. You know, we have had quite an interesting last month here in the month of May. Covered a lot of different things. So early in May, we started talking with some of the Harvard Business Review authors that I was featured with in the new Harvard Business Review book that's available nationwide in airports, in Barnes & Noble, online, all that. Those books you see oftentimes that have the rack of HBR books, it's all on work-life balance. So I was honored that one of the chapters, they have a article that I wrote that's now a chapter in the book on boundaries. And so you want to check that out if you didn't check out those as well. We did a number of sessions all about psychedelic assisted therapy. So from episode 989 all the way through 996, talked with people that are practitioners, talked with researchers, talked with some MAPS trainees, talked with some people that didn't want to disclose who they are because they're doing kind of underground work. Really interesting political discussions and also access discussions as this becomes FDA fast-tracked. So you're going to want to check that out. Your clients are going to be asking these questions, and especially as the FDA is looking at changing the status of MDMA, probably coming in August, based on the people we interviewed. This is something that is in the news that people are thinking about. So make sure you check that out. And then also in just a few episodes, we have episode 1000. On June 5th, we have episode 1000, and we are hoping to get 1,000 reviews by our 1,000th episode. Last time we checked, we were about halfway there. We record this a couple months in advance. So if you haven't reviewed us on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you are listening to this show, would love a review. We rarely ask you for a review, but we're shooting for our 1,000th episode to have 1,000 reviews. So please jump in, do a review for us. That would be wonderful. Also, that episode, we have some amazing people that have sent us messages, that have congratulated us, but even more so have said, here's what stood out to me in these first 1,000 episodes. We want to hear about life-changing things. And so earlier in the last few months, we were asking people to send in their voicemails. So that's going to be a great episode. I have no idea how long it's going to be, but we want to fit it all in. Well, I am just so excited to have Carol Ryan with us today. Carol Ryan, someone who's been very active in our Next Level Practice community, has come to almost every event it seems like that we host she's at, and she started her practice in 2020. Her business, Somatic Interventions, offers body-based trauma-informed treatment, EMDR, somatic movement, yoga, and a number of other interventions that she uses. Carol's considered a top expert on matters related to missing and exploited children, having worked with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children since 2003. The podcast today offers an overview of complex trauma or causes caused by crimes involving childhood, sexual abuse, things like that. Make sure that you know that as we go into this episode today. Carol, welcome to the Practice podcast.
Thank you for having me, Joe. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that you put that trigger warning in your bio as just a reminder to me, hey, we're talking about some stuff today. So thanks so much to make sure that our audience knows what we're digging into today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to start with, so you've been working with the missing and exploited children, the National Center, since 2003. How'd you get involved with that?
Well, it was a personal tragedy. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is the largest entity in our country that deals with searching for missing children, and also cases that involve exploitation, which may or may not mean somebody's missing. And in 2003, I went through that horrific experience of having my daughter disappear from our home. And it was a result of an online relationship that was a grooming kind of thing. And she was 14 at the time, and it took us nearly a month to find her. And she went missing from Michigan and was found in California. And I
Oh
believe
my
that
word.
the resources of the National Center were just integral to us repairing from that tragedy and trauma that we went through.
Man, having two daughters, 9 and 12, I just couldn't imagine. I just that month must have been the worst. I could not even imagine. What details from that situation, um, like, do you think are important to our conversation today?
Well, I'm speaking to the therapist, right? So the first thing that I would say is no, and I was a therapist at the time. So I remember very clearly saying to myself, oh my gosh, I teach classes on regulation and trauma and sleep hygiene. And it was completely different as a lived experience. You are at your worst. And every fear you have, even if it's irrational, surfaces. Every regret you have as a parent, human being, wife, mother, neighbor, all of that comes out. And so, what I would say to the clinician that's working with someone is there is so much going on underneath the surface that may or may not be apparent at the first couple of meetings when you're supporting a family.
Hmm. I definitely want to dig into the clinical issues, but let's talk a little bit about prevention first.
Mm-hmm.
As a
Mm-hmm.
parent, also, clinicians are often working with families. I think what can sometimes happen, I don't know if the data supports this, but this is more of, I guess, a assumption of what I see in parent circles, is that we hear, for kids, have online safety. Don't give away, things like your home address to strangers. But there's so many things in the world that are bombarding parents to do parenting, quote, right, whether it's, the dirty dozen food of organics, or, online safety, or how many activities they should be in, that I think that the safety side of kids and preventing, whether it's trafficking, missing and exploited children, all of those things just gets thrown into the, I guess I should probably do that or have that conversation with my kids. What for you, having, both gone through this and being a therapist that's involved, are the maybe essential, whether it's 5 points or, a handful of conversations that you would say every parent needs to have with their kids?
Well, yeah, great question. First of all, when you go to a school and you say we're going to do an internet safety program, it's about as much fun as saying you're going to do math drills. They've heard it, they're tired of it, they don't believe it, they don't want to say the internet is dangerous. Because for this generation, our kids and our our friends, the internet is essential to their life. And those internet friends are meaningful relationships. So the first thing I would say is don't try to ban the internet and don't teach the stranger danger, you'll never know. What I suggest in the way of prevention is dis- teaching them discerning skills so that they're clever, so that the kids feel empowered going, oh, look at that. I don't need to tell that person that. And so they use their own discernment to make wise choices. And then also inviting that dialogue that if it's a natural reaction, especially the first time. If you walk by a kid's phone, grab it, and you see porn, you freak out and think, "Oh my gosh!" Well, that may have been very innocently brought down, like misspelling a website or just dumping. And so I would remind the parents in the way of prevention is take a breath, easy does it, don't overreact because you're going to build walls. So if you start the dialogue and be comfortable with, hey, yeah, the internet's a wonderful thing. Let's work with it safely so that you can access and enjoy every good thing about it. The other thing I would say is it's not the people, you teach the behavior. So you look to the behavior, because exploitation could be a close family friend. In our case, it was a church member. So,
Mm,
your guards can come down with people you trust. So you start identifying what would be appropriate behavior. So with regard to online work and images, that's specifically, child sexual abuse material, nudity, suggestive images, what to do with it. And one of the greatest tools is don't worry about figuring that out. Just refer that information to the cyber tip line.
mm,
And it's cyber tip line. You can just Google it. You can do cybertipline.org, the National Center for Missing. They have a link. This is a wonderful tool. It's an informational tool as well as a report mechanism. So let's say a child gets a questionable image. Um, here's a penis looking at me. What's that all about? Well, they're grossed out, or they think they're going to get in trouble with their parents, and they're going to take my phone away. And instead, what you can teach that child or the parent, and the counselor can teach a family this, any kind of images that are questionable, even text messages that are questionable, just forward it on to the cyber tip line. This
mm,
it can be anonymous. You do not have to make an allegation. You just say, I received this. It made me feel uncomfortable. I'd like to report it. Do not send images. Don't transfer any images. You just need to get on their website, answer the simple questions. And if you can't answer the questions, they even have the opportunity you can speak to someone. And that's a
mm,
24/7 program.
mm. And I want to hear more about what they do with that information once it goes through. But before we get there, what other conversations should parents or therapists be having with tweens, teens, even elementary? Like I'm
Mhm.
thinking about my 12-year-old. So a couple years ago, more and more of her friends were getting cell phones. That was something I wanted to delay for a bit, but it just got to the point where I saw she was being left out of conversations and left out of plans because she wasn't part of group chats. So
Mhm.
we got one of these Gab phones, which is aimed at kind of younger kids, and I get these notifications. The notifications I get for potential nudity is usually her sending a picture of one of her like dolls that she has, like a Barbie, that then it flags as potential nudity, and it shows me this blurred out picture. It doesn't show the actual picture, but then we get to have a conversation about that, or it flags
Mhm.
even certain words like if one of her friends says something about school really being terrible, like, so it does things like that. But as we talk, we're talking about having her have a different level of phone. She showed a lot of responsibility. We had
Mhm.
sort of a contract, not sort of, we had a contract of what her side of the responsibility is, what my side is. When kids are getting more and more freedom, what are some of those preventative things that as parents we can do without being those helicopter or lawnmower parents?
Mhm. Set definite limits on the phone. I would say, do not have the phone in the bedroom at night. You can just, have a curfew for the phone. It's like, you know what, bedtime's 10 o'clock. Turn off the phone, put it in the, kitchen on the charging dock. That helps a lot. I think that periodically checking the phone is not paranoia. I think it's just wise parenting, because it's, especially if your children are young. I think it's very presumptuous of us to think that they're going to have the maturity to handle, maybe inappropriate material or harassment. And they may or may not talk to you about it. So if you periodically check, and you can obviously tell them, hey, I'm going to, I'm checking your phone, or I checked your phone and I was concerned about some text messages. Go in with the information of, this is about a conversation. This is about building a relationship of trust rather than punishing and preventing. I mean, you can certainly respond and say, hey, we need to take action, but just be transparent. And again, show your child why you're concerned, instead of saying that looks like a sexy, a girl being very sexy and inappropriate. Well, that's a judgment call. It may look different to your daughter or son. And just to be able to say, I see this as sexy and a little suggestive. Do you see why? And just opening it up as a dialogue.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's that shift in generations of going from, even with, say, like the sex talk, that it's this,
Mhm,
the sex talk, we sit down, we have it, we're done,
mhm,
versus, over a lifetime of parenting, having this open dialogue about
mhm,
sexuality. To
mhm.
me, it sounds like the same sort of thing, where we're not just saying we're
Absolutely.
having the tech talk, but it's this conversation, it's this learning. It's like, we're preparing these kids for adulthood and to make their own decisions. And if the day they turn 18, that's when they start making these decisions, that's a huge shift for them if the parent has been really kind of lording over them that whole time. Now, what happens? So I want to move from prevention sort of into that action. So you talked
Wait,
about
can I say
report.
one thing, Joe? I want to
Yeah.
add one thing. It's really important to think about brain development in adolescence. Brain the Their forward ability to measure danger is very limited. What they see is the benefit and pleasure. They do not see danger. So that's why I think it's important that we understand that as adults, and factor in their cognitive limitations. It's not that they don't want to see it. They don't have the development to really discern the long-term impact of certain things. Just like they can be nocturnal in adolescence, their time of sleep, they're going to want to stay up late. So that's why they say, they suggest, removing the phones and even the game stations, because you can get online and have access. And that's only just to create like sleep hygiene habits, and allow the kids some space away from being accountable to friends who might text them in the middle of the night.
Mm. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using therapy notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com, and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. So when we move kind of into that next action phase, and thank you for bringing up the brain as well. What what are trends that people need to be aware of as therapists and as parents or as adult caregivers in regards to, how people are, how predators are thinking through this, how they're, getting kids to have these conversations. Like, what are things that we need to be aware of at the time of this recording?
Well, I think it's really interesting, is that with regarding to online abuse. Okay, so what the definition of child porn is any visual depiction of sexually explicit conduct of someone under the age of 18. With the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they use a term CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material, because it's the depiction of sexually explicit conduct is sexual abuse. So they are very adamant about using that term, because the images and text messages, the instant messages, document the abuse and exploitation. And sharing of files, sharing of text messages is re-victimization. And
Mm,
70% of victims feel the distribution impacts them as painfully or more than the actual abuse,
mm,
because it never ends, and it makes the whole world dangerous. Like ooh, why, what, you mean everybody that I go to the store and see is might be that creepy kind of person that would look at that? You know, or, oh, you see me? Do you recognize me? Do you remember what I had to do?
Mhm.
You
And I
know,
definitely want to get to the kind of after things happen. But for the part right now, like what are the things that we need to be aware of in regards to, for example, like my 9-year-old, she's only on apps where there's set things that she can say to people.
hmm,
There's no like back and forth actual chat. It's just like,
yeah,
she can
one
select
sided.
from a couple statements. um what are some of those other things that we just need to be aware of in regards to, when the kids are online, making sure that they're safe, that they're not moving towards being groomed.
I would really be aware of the language. You know, if you know the stages of grooming, it would be helpful. Um, the targeting. There's that's the first step is somebody is targeted, and then the person that's targeting them will then try to create access to them, and they do that by providing something, whether it's flattery, information, resources like a coach. Well, the access comes through the coaching. And what makes that coach appealing is, hey, I want to be better at soccer, right? Um, and then what usually happens is at some point, the relationship is pretty benign and wholesome, but at some point, that line gets crossed. And if the child, and it doesn't have to be a child, it can be an adult, doesn't feel they adequately stopped the behavior. Maybe they ignored it, or maybe they ran away and they feel bad that they didn't confront or tell someone. If they don't feel they adequately dealt with it, they can often feel that they somehow consented to it. Or let's say the coach of the soccer team, let's just use that example. Um, I might be grooming them online, but in person, we're just fine. So it can be very confusing. And the child might suddenly get picked for the A team and then feel the benefit of this relationship. So it can be really, really confusing. And one of the things that I say when you think about listening and prevention is listen for certain keywords like language that maybe your child would not say, or material information that would indicate, wow, where'd you learn that? What do you, that's an interesting word, do you know what that means? I had a story told me where a mom was saying, my daughter started using this term, oh, blow me. And she's like, I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, oh, it's nothing. And she's like, well, wait, where'd you learn that? And it turned out that there was somebody that was, having contact with her and was slowly introducing these kinds of terms. So it was a good thing that that parent was able to go, hey, let's talk about that. Where did you learn that? And, there was a little defensiveness, but she just kept, just easy does it. It's okay. And just reapproaching. And if the first conversation doesn't work, just invite it later on. Understand you're going to be dealing with defensiveness and fear of embarrassment or fear of punishment. Another thing that's really important about grooming, Joe, is, we think, why do the kids allow this? Why do they allow it? Often, early on in the grooming, the kids are either exposed or they participate in forbidden behavior. It might be, you know, being able to smoke cigarettes or hit a joint um, or even watch movies, that involve sexual content. And they know it's wrong, but they did it. So now they're part of the secret. And that's where some of that
Hmm.
complicit behavior really serves the perpetrators beautifully, because the victims, the targeted victims, are doing it themselves. A person doesn't have to kidnap you anymore. They don't have to break in your house. All they got to do is get you to respond to a text message,
Hmm.
send a selfie.
Yeah, tell me about kind of selfie text messages, kind of things to think about as a therapist or parent in regards to that.
Hmm. First of all, it's completely understandable why a young person wants to know, how do I measure up? Am I pretty enough? Am I handsome enough? Am I manly enough? And these are normal needs. And we actually raise in our Western culture, we are camera happy people. So we have taught our children to expect to videotape and take pictures of themselves. So it's very common for young people to date, and I put that in quotations. They date online by sending images and text messages and developing kind of a pen pal relationship. It's all done through electronic means. So the virtual intimacy can be quite intimate. Imagine nude pictures or filming each other in with tops off. That can be, very, very important, very validating, very intimate and special. And it can lead to inappropriate behavior and it could be innocent. It could be, what if it's two middle schoolers that are just experimenting and they break up, and then the middle schooler boyfriend or girlfriend shares the images, or they accidentally get shared with a friend looking on another person's phone and go, "Oh my gosh, that's Karen." you know so that's how a lot of it gets started. And there's then a great deal of embarrassment and motivation to keep secret, and that's where often the exploitation can come in, the bullying or the enticement, like, you need to send me money, or you need to send me more pictures, or you need to do my homework. I mean, it's just, I'm always surprised at how potent virtual abuse is.
Hmm. Now, for clinicians working with people that have been exploited, missing, maybe even some of this kind of cyberbullying that happens in schools that has sexual tones to it, what do therapists need to keep in mind as they do this clinical work?
Depending on who they're working with, if they're working with the parents, there's three things I want to say to everyone. One, admit what you don't know, and seek consultation from people who do know more. It is naive. It's just not, how we used to say, "Oh, I'm colorblind," or "Gender doesn't matter. That's in the bedroom." Well, we all know now it matters a lot, right? It's part of competency to admit that I don't have that background. I need some training. Well, with best practices, it's the same thing with exploitation or missing children. If you say, "Well, I work with, at-risk youth," it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing to say, I work with juvenile detention, and so I know about online exploitation. So get some help, and consultation is for free. You can get free consultation at any time from the Family Advocacy Division at the National Center for Missing and Exploited. So that's available, and they also have teams of therapists that will willingly consult with other therapists.
Mm.
The other thing I would say is, when you're working with parents, remember that this is a snapshot of the most horrific, embarrassing, private, stigmatizing, icky, yucky event that you're dealing with. So they're going to be either super guarded or like a puddle in your office. And they could also be feeling a lot of strain inside the home with sibling issues or finance. It's very the impact is beyond the sexual conduct. You have parents that are worried about time off work, finances, finding the right counselors, dealing with reputation. Um, what if dad or mom had a drinking problem that now flared up again? Or what if they find out we're going to be going through bankruptcy? What if the family is split and there's a divorce, and now you're dealing with blended families and finger pointing, and this is why it happened. So it's a very complex kind of problem. And then the third thing I would say is, take a holistic approach to treatment. So, meaning, don't be afraid to ask, have you considered what's going to happen to your daughter who has missed a month of school? should we look at tutoring? Do you have resources? Have you contacted the school? Or what about housing? What about safety? What if the predator is still out at large and you don't even know where it's coming from? What about medical needs? Taking a big holistic approach and understanding that it's going to take time. The very best thing you can do is join them in non-judgment and admit that you don't know everything. Let them explain, because they didn't know it either until it happened to them. They'll relate to that.
Mm. Well, there's so much to cover here, but my last question is always, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
That there's treatment, that recovery is possible. The most damaged, seemingly hopeless situation is not hopeless at all. These kids and these families are resilient.
So great. If people want to connect with you, if they want to work with you, where's the best place for us to send them?
Sure. Contact me at my website, www.somaticinterventions.com. Feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to share any information or point you in the direction of resources.
Well, Carol, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you, Joe. And one last thing, don't be afraid of these. Don't be afraid to have children, and don't be afraid of the technology. We can make this work.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Well, heavy and important things to cover today. That's the work we do as therapists. And so covering these clinical issues is something we do frequently in Next Level Practice, Group Practice Launch, Group Practice Boss, our membership communities. Those all opened up when we had our last Level Up week. That was back in March. So we're going to be opening those back up in September. But you can always reach out to us and see what resources we have available over at practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Also, we could not do this show without our amazing sponsors. Today, Therapy Notes is our sponsor. They're the best electronic health records out there. They will help you transition from whatever EHR you're on. They have live support that are actually there to help you live, not just some chat bot. And you can get a couple months for free. Just use promo code Joe at checkout when you go to therapynotes.com. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.